My guest tonight is very, very tall and a global fashion icon.
Had you watched Top Gear up to the point that you went on the show?
No.
Jodie Kidd!
I have no idea, but I found myself in the car industry. I had a friend that was driving an F40, burnt down Fifth Avenue and was chucking $1 bills. And I was like, this is beyond fabulous. I think at the beginning I was the only girl that was in the series, the only 6'2" blonde model. I mean, not the kind of person that races cars. Jeremy goes careering into these corners.
That went on to also not be your last Top Gear appearance.
Jeremy's now a very, very close friend of mine.
Jodie, Wikipedia describes you as an English fashion model and television personality.
Yes.
But there is so much more to you than that. So in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Gosh, it's going to be a long intro because I'm a kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. No, I started off modelling when I was about 16. So I did that for about 10, 15 years, travelling around the world, doing the most amazing kind of catwalks and fashion campaigns, and just a really wonderful time to be in modelling as well. So the very early days of Alexander McQueen and John Galliano and proper legends in the industry. And then I went on, had enough of modelling, did my quota. And I have no idea, but I found myself in the car industry, as in I started racing cars. But there's a much longer story to that. But yeah, so I went into cars, and then we're actually here at my beautiful pub, which is the Half Moon in West Sussex. So I'm a landlady as well, bit of an entrepreneur. I've got a few businesses. So yeah, a bit of everything. It would be the longest podcast in the world if I was to tell you absolutely everything.
Well, the first time I ever met you was actually car-related, shock, and it was at a supercar driver breakfast meet at Joe McCarthy. Now, I believe it was back in 2016.
Gosh.
And you started chatting to my dad about your love for Maserati.
Yes.
I remember it crystal clear. And when we left, he said, I was talking to Jodie for so long about Maserati and the Mille Miglia.
Yeah.
Why are you that passionate about cars? What is the earliest memory that you have of something that makes you that passionate?
I think I was brought up in the countryside, and from a very early age, I was driving tractors, and we used to make all our own hay and kind of all the machinery that involves and things like that. So and when you're kind of driving a tractor, I was probably 9 or 10. I was quite young, and so I always loved machinery. But I used to ride horses, and that's what I wanted to do. My dad was on the British team for show jumping, and I really wanted to basically follow his footsteps. So there was this love of horsepower that kind of started at an early age, that obviously I went to several hundred more than just the 1 horsepower. But I think it would just be driving around the farm. I used to have to go and get horse feed, and I used to, from probably 11 or 12 years old, we had this little old Golf, and I used to drive it up and then take it out to the horses, and then used to whap round the fields, doing donuts and things.
I was about to say, when you start painting a picture with words, people listening and watching start to imagine their version of that picture.
Yeah.
You were painting quite a tranquil picture, so they might have imagined you just driving slowly down to the horses.
No.
What I was picturing was that Ferrari Enzo video on a farm that went viral on YouTube years ago.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's exactly what I was picturing. But do you think that kind of growing up in the countryside pushed you towards a city life for a bit and a completely kind of different change?
Yeah, I mean, when I only lived in the city when I was modelling, and that's just because, literally every day I was having to work at a studio, or, I was predominantly actually in a different country. So I lived in New York for a while. I did a stint in, Milan and Paris and all of those things. So, but my heart was never in a city. I just did it for kind of work and accessibility. And then as soon as I could, and I didn't need to be in the city, 7 days a week, I got back out to the country. I mean, as you can tell, we're looking at the most beautiful kind of garden in this very tranquil pub in the middle of West Sussex. And this was actually where I was brought up, not far from here.
When you were in the height of your career, 7 days a week, different countries, could you ever imagine that you'd have blinked and years later you would have a pub and a passion for cars and all these other things going on?
At all. Because I mean, my grandmother, she had lovely cars. So she had an E-Type. And I remember the story, and I was obviously I don't even think I was born, but it was when the M1 first opened, and she had the E-Type, and she told this wonderful friend of hers that I'm very, very close with, Rachel, and she said, right, get in the car, we're going to go up the first time a motorway had opened to see how fast we can go in the E-Type. And apparently they went way over 100 miles an hour, and it was like, this story that I was kind of brought up on. And my dad was you flew helicopters and flew planes, and so there was always this kind of love of speed, I think, that was kind of in my DNA without really knowing it. So yeah, it was definitely there.
When you were 7 days a week, flat out modelling, did the car and luxury side of that ever take your fancy? Did you ever notice it, or were you so into what you were doing at the time that it wasn't even on your radar?
Didn't even look. I mean, a car was to get me to and from the airport or to and from a studio, and I normally was so exhausted I would just get in the back and go to sleep, and then just arrive somewhere and off to another country. So no, I didn't really appreciate cars. But whilst this was going on, my kind of group of friends in London kind of crossed over with Maximilian Cooper, who we all know has started the Gumball Rally. And so I had a group of friends, and Carter, who's a very good friend of mine, and they were all doing the very first early days of Gumballs. So there was all this kind of chit-chat going on of, my mates all doing these amazing journeys in cars across the world, and the very early days of Gumball. So I was kind of like, and they were the real cool crowd. There was a great bunch of people that were doing early Gumballs. And I had friends that did it. And so that was where I was in New York for New York Fashion Week. And I had a friend of mine, and he said the Gumball was starting in New York, and they're going from New York to LA. And if you're about, I've got a space in the back of my car. Why don't you, it's amazing. You get to drive across America. And that was, I said, why not? It's kind of a decision that I'm very, very thankful for. But I was also, when do you ever get a chance to drive across America and do things like that, especially with my kind of work schedule? Anyway, so I took the 5 days or 6 days off, and that was where I really my eyes were like, bang!
You've been on God knows how many trips and tours and road trips since then. Is your first Gumball, your first proper rally experience, like your favourite memory of all of them?
It was, because, it was the first time I first saw a Koenigsegg. The very first Koenigsegg was flown over and, did 242 miles an hour, and there was the most amazing F50s, and there was just, Ferraris, F40. You name it.
Did you know what those cars were at the time?
No, not massive. Obviously I knew a Ferrari, but Koenigsegg was definitely a new car that I'd never really seen before. I don't think anyone had really seen it. I don't know whether this is in the 90s. Probably will be. Maybe late 90s. So yeah, that was where... And it was just completely fabulous. I had a friend that was driving an F40, and he went and changed something like, I don't know, as this is a typical Gumball story, but something like $10,000, because obviously I have a lot of money, and put it in $1 bills. And as we were leaving New York City, and the F40s are open, and he basically just burnt down Fifth Avenue and was chucking the $1 bills. And I just remember this scene of the rear end of an F40 burning down. I don't know if it was Fifth Avenue or whatever avenue it was, but just this scene and then this $1 bills all going round in a circle. And I was like, this is beyond fabulous. I've got to get more involved in this. I mean, it's something that, it's a moment you'll never, ever forget.
And that's probably quite a significant moment because for context to the years that's followed and the trips you've been on, the things you've got involved in, and even at the pub here, the amount of meets and cars and gatherings that you have is unbelievable. So I like to try and find those moments of like pure context of what then follows. But there's that. And then there's ending up sharing that passion on Top Gear.
Yes.
Because when you actually search up Jodie Kidd cars, even with all the videos, one of the first videos that comes up is you as the star in a reasonably priced car driving around Dunsfold. And as much as this is embarrassing for me, I do have a little bit extra to this particular question and story because I've been lucky enough to drive the same Suzuki Liana as you around the Dunsfold track.
Did you?
With the Stig Ben Collins. It was the Stig after.
Ben. Yes.
I think it was the Stig after the Stig you had.
Who was Perry McCarthy was the Stig when I did it. Yeah, so Ben was after.
Now, I did.
Yeah. Oh, no. Really? You
a
got
1 minute 50. I couldn't get in the... but there's more to this.
That's
but
not
for
too
that.
bad.
And you did a leaderboard topping 1 minute 45.
Yeah.
Beating JK.
Yeah, and then they told me to get out. I only did 4 or 5 laps. And I was going, no. And it was the first time I'd ever raced, ever been on a track, ever done anything. I mean, I'd only literally got my driving license about a couple of years before. And so I kind of went round, I did the first lap, and I was like, oh, God, okay, right, I'm just checking. I think I braked too late into there. And they were going, no, you did quite well. And I was like, no, I can get better around that top corner. Anyway, we came round again, and you have to stop every time, and then it's a standing start. So you get to reset the cameras and everything. And I kept on winding the the window down to speak to Perry. And I was going, I think I was better. And he was going, yeah, you're better. And I could see everyone's eyes kind of lighting up a bit. And then I did my 4th or 5th lap. And they were like, right, you can get out. And I was like, no, I can go a lot faster. And they were going, no, you've got to get out now. And I didn't know by the 3rd lap I'd beaten JK. And by the 4th lap I'd beaten him by half a second. And then by so I was getting
quite
faster
unbelievable.
And faster. But it was Perry McCarthy from that moment who turned around quietly after the filming and said, look, you've got a talent. You should really do some racing. And so I quietly went from that moment down to Goodwood and I got my ARDs and kind of went very quietly into seeing if racing cars was going to be a kind of a moment of my life that I was going to just have fun and boy, that happened. Make sure you subscribe to Road to Success. Chin chin.
With this internal love of automotive, had you watched Top Gear up to the point that you went on the show?
No.
Did you not?
No.
So to you, was it just appearing
I was like
with
Chanel and
with so many
Galliano.
appearances and things to do and interviews to do?
Yeah.
Did you have any idea at the time? Because obviously looking back, it's so cool to have done that, especially with a love of cars.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea how significant that moment was at the time?
I really didn't. I didn't because after I'd finished the Gumball, it all happened quite quickly, which I was sitting in the back. I didn't even drive, but I was just witnessing the most extraordinary kind of things and cars and people and characters. And I flew back to the UK to give an award at an event. And that was where I sat next to Jeremy Clarkson. And I went, you're the car man. I kind of obviously knew. And then, and I was like, I'm really sorry. I don't think I've watched a full Top Gear, episode. But I was like, I've just done this. And I started talking about the Coney and I started talking about all the other things. And he said, wow, it's really unusual to have a woman that is so enthusiastic about cars and loves cars. He said, come on the show. And I was like, yeah, I probably had a couple of glasses of champagne at this point because it was an award ceremony. And I didn't think anything of it. And then a couple of months later was when I got the phone call to go down to Dunsfold and didn't do any DD at all. Didn't know that I could have, did a bit of kind of, not testing, like some practice or go around a track somewhere or kind of like that I was driving a Suzuki. I had no idea about anything. I just turned up kind of like very naive.
That moment that you realised you were quite quick and you saw yourself go on the top of the timings and everything that then followed.
Mental.
Did it really unlock something for you like that evening? Did you go home thinking, what the hell just happened?
No, I didn't. I mean, I was like amazed that I'd beaten everyone, but I wasn't like obsessive about this show. And I went to Goodwood. So obviously people had started seeing me and started inviting me to different car events. And I went to Festival of Speed, and I was asked by, I'm not sure, I think, was it Maserati? It could have been Maserati because they picked me up very quickly. And they said, would you like to do the supercar run? And I think I was only a passenger. I don't even think I was driving at this point. And Jay had his black Enzo. And because it was a Ferrari, it was next to the Maseratis.
This is JK, who you beat on the show.
Yeah, sorry, yes. And as I literally turned up, went up the hill, came back down, and then I had to do the next timed run, or not timed run, or the next
show run.
Yeah, show run. And all the cars, it was really hot, and all the cars were covered in dust. And someone had written on the back of Jay's Enzo, Jodie's whooped your ass or something like this. And it was the people at Goodwood that were going, yes, Jode's amazing. I had women coming up to me and going, you're just such an inspiration. And I was like, bloody hell, what is going on? And it was at that moment where I went, I think that was something that was quite special. And so I'd have to say everyone at Goodwood was a real eye-opener to see how epic that show is. And now, obviously, I know, and how brilliant it is.
And that went on to also not be your last Top Gear appearance, because you had such an impact on Clarkson and everything that you did and going top of the leaderboard that you appeared in Clarkson's Thriller in 2008 in a Fiat 500.
Yes, we did a DVD and he crashed into me. Yeah, I remember
and apparently you were also a guest in race for Top Gear UK versus Top Gear Australia for the Ashes.
Yeah, that was mental. They had two cars on top of each other, and I don't know if I was with Clark. I think I was with Jeremy, and the person in the bottom car was controlling the throttle and the brake, and the person at the top car that was screwed on had the steering. So Jeremy, obviously the most heavy right-footed man I've known in my whole entire life, goes careering into these corners, and I'm like steering, shouting down it, brake. So and Jeremy's now a very, very close friend of mine. So they're just amazing. Whatever they do is just the best TV in history, I think.
When you look back on those memories now, you're obviously so well known and so successful in your modelling career. Mm. But do some of those memories you look back more fond on than your time in modelling, or is it kind of equal?
Definitely. No, definitely. Like the first time I ever won a Trofeo race, I think was one of the best moments of my life. Getting up onto the podium, doing the Mille Miglia is one of my favourite races on the planet. Those memories. I mean, I've done some amazing photographs and worked with the most iconic photographers and opened, the best shows in the world and done some incredible things in the modelling. But that was kind of like a job, whereas me driving and talking about cars or meeting people around cars or reviewing cars, that for me is just a love. It's a pleasure.
When you grew up in those earliest years, we've given context to the things that have obviously flowed through your blood to become the person that's into cars as they are. But what about the context to the person, the model that then ensued? Growing up, were you confident? Were you happy in front of camera? Did you like that lifestyle? Was that also in you from an early age?
The modelling career, obviously, when you're trying to walk down a catwalk in front of the world's press wearing the most outrageous couture gowns, and you've got 2,000 people watching you, it built up a certain understanding of being looked at and being on the other side of the camera and being photographed and talking in front of camera. And so from a very early age, that was something that I learned pretty quickly.
But did you believe from a very early age, and I get the feeling you did because you're very confident, but did you believe that you were a good model from an early age?
I think the proof is in the pudding, really. So, I mean, working and shooting for British Vogue to opening Chanel to...
The point that I'm making is if that was the case,
Yeah.
maybe the enjoyment for the car stuff is so much more because it's discovering something that you actually didn't know was in there.
Yeah, but I never wanted to be a model. I wanted to ride horses. So they were both just... when I do something, I fully immerse myself and try and be the best that I possibly can. And so like when I bought the pub, I'd never been in hospitality in my life. And I said, right, I don't want to be another kind of famous person or celebrity person to just put their name behind a pub. I spent 2 years from being on pot wash to polishing glasses to working on the pass to understanding P&Ls to changing the pipes and the barrels so when I do something, I'm like fully in. And, that was modelling to me. And then the car things, obviously, if I was going to race, I was going to try and be the best that I possibly can. Obviously not going to be as quick as the boys, but I'm going to give them a good run for their money.
Well, you say that quite humbly, that sentence, but you obviously are as quick as the boys because in previous times you've shown that you can be a lot faster. But do you remember your
Maybe
first
not
race?
Hamilton. My first, that was the most terrifying thing ever because I'm not sure if we could talk about it. Maybe we can talk about it, but they had the Ferrari finals and Schumacher Ferrari had just won the constructors and he had just won the drivers. And it was the Monza race. And it was the 360 challenge, the Maserati Trofeo and Ferrari were bringing Shui and the winning constructors car to do a big circuit celebration for them winning the double. And so they wanted me for that to be my first race. And to be honest, that was my first competitive race. And there must have been, I don't know, maybe, and I'm not trying to big this up, but I think over 200,000 people that had descended on Monza or around Monza. And it was my first race. And barreling down the pit straight to get to that chicane, I will never, with 30 other cars as my first proper race, was possibly one of the most terrifying but amazing experiences I've ever done in my whole entire life.
Do you always find that the 2.5, 3 minutes before you actually put your foot down and depart the line is the most terrifying part instead of the race?
I forget. I'm like, I don't know how to drive a car. I don't know where I'm going. Normally, you know the track, you know exactly. And I'm going, is the first corner right? Is it left? Is it a hairpin? Is it, well, I don't know where I'm going. Where am I? What country? I don't know how to get, the whole brain just goes to mush and you just kind of just like forget everything. But as soon as the lights go off, you're just like, all green.
So what happened when you made it past the first corner?
Took a while for, the sick to be re-swallowed, I think, at that point. And it takes a while just to settle. But there's something that is so incredible when you're racing a car and it's just you and the car and the other cars and the tarmac and you just get into this flow state. And I'm quite quick to get into where it's just the full concentration and it's just laser kind of concentration. And I love that. So it took a couple of laps to,
And that's a proper car as well.
Yeah, the Trofeos, they weren't the easiest things to drive. They were kind of based on the Maserati road car at the time, which was the 200s. I can't remember what it was. It was the one after the boomerang lights. Or maybe it was the boomerang lights. And so it was quite boaty. Because
the boomerang lights car you actually owned, am I right in saying?
Did I? Well, I had this lovely deal where I raced for Maserati for about 3 years and was their kind of pilot for them. So I got a car thrown in. So I went through a lot of them, from the Spiders to the Grand Sports and they were renowned. They used to Jeremy used to absolutely wind me up because they were renowned to be quite terrible at the time, even though I never had a problem and I loved them.
I think up until recently, Maserati have always had that thing, but there's just something about that trident at the front, something about... Funny enough, when we met you for the first time, my dad had a MC Stradale.
Yeah.
This was before I had a driver's license. It was
Yeah.
years ago, which was why we were at
Yeah.
that Joe McCarthy meet.
Yeah.
But does Italian cars to you mean the most out of everything? Because it's the
best.
the sexiest and the most passionate and the most soul.
I mean, I should be saying, the British cars. I mean, we've got some of the most incredible, from Astons to, Jaguars to, the most incredible history in motorsport as well. But I think because I'm actually officially an Italian racing driver, because I don't think I said that at the beginning, I forgot. But yeah, because that was my first competitive race at Monza. In England, you have to do a certain amount of races before, with a big X on your back, before you can kind of go to a level of that power of that car. But in Italy, you didn't. So that was how that they managed to get me into the Ferrari finals. So I basically...
So how much training had you had?
0. I mean, I'd been up to Fiorano. I'd done track days in Italy. They'd trained me. They knew I had this amazing...
But it was Italian training, like, you'll be
Italian.
fine.
And when I took my test, I took it with this is so naughty. God, I'm so sorry, Sylvia, if you're listening to this. But because I didn't really speak Italian that well, I went with a translator. And he was like, okay, the question. So when you see a blue flag, is it A, report immediately to race control? Is it B, there is, oil on the track?
And they were
And
telling
then he
you
was
the
like,
answers.
you are driving slow, you need to, pull over, someone can overtake you. I was like, yes, that one.
They
was
really wanted you in
basically
that car,
they
didn't
did.
they?
But I hope I didn't let them down, which I didn't. I didn't let them down.
Was
Sure.
there ever a part then of your life where you were enjoying the automotive world so much that you actually started to let go a little bit of the amount of work that you were doing in modelling?
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. When I first got the call from Maserati, they said they want to send me over to Italy to do an advanced racing course. And they put me at Fiorano with this ex-Formula One driver called Ivan Capello. And he basically put me through my paces. And we must have done, 150 laps, absolutely, quite full-on training. And that's when they turned around and said, look, we would like you to now come here, learn, we'll teach you, get to know the cars, and then in a couple of months, we're going to stick you in Monza and off you go. So from that moment onwards, my whole dedication was being in Italy and learning how to race cars.
What was your first goal from then? Like, did you then, when you started to get that serious about it, set yourself some targets, stuff you wanted to win, things you wanted to compete in?
I think at the beginning I was the only girl that was in the series, let alone the only 6'2" blonde model. I mean, they're just not the kind of the usual kind of person that races cars. So at the beginning, all the other drivers, and I mean, Joe McCarthy was racing at the time, Rob Wilson, you had you had amazing drivers that were participating because it was a gentleman race, so you could have professional racers along with an amateur. So I was very lucky and had amazing professional drivers that joined me or in my car. But what was I talking about? I can't remember. Ivan Capelli? No, I'd gone on from that. What was the question? I've completely lost myself.
The question was what you targeted yourself to do.
So yes, so they were, at the beginning, I was not a threat. And, I was kind of,
Were you the only woman on the grid?
Yeah, by far.
Do you think they'd ever seen another woman on the grid?
Not quite sure. Probably, maybe, but it was very rare. And what would happen is, because you would both of you would do a qualifying lap, and obviously because I had everyone from Ralph Furman to Johnny Herbert to, the best racers, professional racers that shared my car with me. I was always like on pole. So I'm kind of sitting there and I'm going, and they're, sometimes you have professional drivers that would straight, but you're like, ah! So at the beginning, I wasn't a threat, and I still didn't know where I was going. I'd never been round half of the tracks, never been round Spa for the first time, had never been round Imola, never been round Silverstone, never been around, I mean, the best tracks in Europe that I was finding myself kind of participating in this series. So a lot of the time I had no idea where I was going.
Did you ever have any fear?
Oh, kind of. But
fear of crashing?
Yeah, absolutely. But you've got to kind of learn to get that fear and try and embrace it, and it becomes your friend, and it becomes that point of making sure you don't crash, but you've got to push those envelopes and those boundaries.
It's fair to say that like a preconceived thought probably of many of models that were then suddenly thrown in cars is bitsy, ooh,
no, I know.
Just a look. Do you think that raw upbringing on a farm throwing hay
definitely
was
and
the result of your competitive spirit and grit?
I was very, very competitive. And that's just, like my dad was representing England, you don't get to that level unless you're seriously competitive. My brother was an amazing horseman, my sister, and being the youngest of 5, I think there was, I was brought up with going to shows and winning, had to win. Because I was often told that if we didn't win a class, and this was as a young girl when I was competing, if we didn't win a class, we hadn't got enough money to fill the petrol or the diesel up in the lorry to get home. So I would not come back unless I'd won every single class I'd been in. So there was this very serious underlying focus that I had, but not that I was big-headed or unrealistic. I knew that, I was very much the underdog. I was a woman in a really, really male-dominated sport. And I had no idea of many of the tracks that I was going to. I was still completely naive. So I was cautious, but also really driven to be the best that I possibly can, and also not to let all the other girls out there down, and let Maserati down. But so that at the beginning I was I wasn't too much of a threat to anyone. But the more after a year or so, then I started coming up higher. Then I was like middle of the pack, and then I started, I got third, and I won one. Then so then the drivers start seeing a different side, and then it starts getting very aggressive, and it was a totally different ball game when they couldn't overtake you.
Do you remember the angriest you ever were at yourself during that racing?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, there was.
Would you ever beat yourself up?
No, because I think I was so out of
so
water.
Good.
No, I wasn't. I really wasn't. I was so out of water, if that makes sense, that it was, for me to even get round the track was kind of like I was winning because, of being the only female really, and especially from my kind of modelling background, it was kind of like, I was proud of myself, and I think that was the people around me as well. They all thought I was absolutely bonkers crazy, and they were like, "Oh my God, you didn't die! Well done, my mum."
I was going to ask this because your friends from modelling and the circles you must have had in that world, did they come and watch a race? Like, did they? And what did they think of what you were doing? Surely it was very unfamiliar for someone to be walking down the catwalk one minute, and driving down the main straight the next.
Yeah, it was a very, very foreign world, and I don't think any of my friends really came to watch me. Maybe they did a few. Some of my old kind of farm childhood friends definitely came to support me, but no, I don't think I crossed over the modelling industry into the motorsport industry.
So if I gave you 5 words, and I think we've said every single one of them on this podcast so far, okay, I'd love you to tell me which one resonates with you straight away. Which one you'd
cider burp.
Well, that broke that very deep moment, didn't it?
I'm sorry. I'm back.
How real. Well, of these 5 words, which one jumps out at you the most, resonates with you? And we've definitely said every single one on this podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Number 1 is catwalk. Number 2 is road trip. Number 3 is Ferrari. Number 4 is pub. Number 5 is Top Gear. You've got catwalk, road trip, Ferrari, pub, or Top Gear.
jumps out. I would have to say probably Top Gear, because it was such a pivotal moment in my life that changed everything there onwards. I wouldn't have the pub if it wasn't from Top Gear. I wouldn't have a number of those things without Top Gear. It really did have a huge, amazing effect, and still is. I mean, we're still talking about it now. I mean, 20 years down the line.
Did you ever, when you were racing, for extra confidence or to bolster your brain when you're sat on the line, think of that moment you went top of the leaderboard?
No, I don't think so. I was just thinking, oh my God, what happens after the first corner? What gear am I supposed to be in? Yeah, so no, I don't know. I'm not I don't know. That's not me. That's a kind of I get a bit kind of shy about it.
In more recent years, you decided to start your own YouTube channel.
I did.
Kid in a Sweet Shop.
Yes.
Where did the name come from? Did it come to you very quickly?
Yeah, a friend of mine. So Chris came up with that, which was a great name. And yeah, it was a lockdown idea. Just all of us had trolled through every single Amazon, Netflix thing there was, and so I wasn't really a big YouTuber at all. My son was. And so I started because there was nothing else to watch, because we're all like prisoners. And so I started getting like really deep into YouTube. And of course, one of the first things was, following all the automotive content creators. And I started looking. There wasn't many women. There was Alex, Supercar Blondie. And I was going, I can do this. I think it would be great because I can also bring the racing side of things. I don't think there's too many kind of racing reviewing kind of women. And I just saw this, and Alex had been so successful. And I thought, God, I'd love to do it. And it's a way, I did a show called The Classic Car Show with Quentin Wilson. I'd done a few other car-y bits for terrestrial channels. And when you're controlled by a channel, you have very little say in anything. And I just thought the freedom that you can get for YouTube and how you can really be you rather than following a massive script. And so I thought, well, let's start it up and let's see where we go. And yeah, it just kind of went on from there. And the thing is, over so many years of being around cars and launching cars and working for different manufacturers and becoming very good friends with designers and owners and collectors, and that I just, I had this lovely address book that I could say, hey, I'm doing this, can I come up for a chat? And they were like, oh God, okay, I'll fit you in somehow. You know what it's like. It's not an easy thing.
So as you said earlier, when you do something, you go into it full bore.
Yeah.
100%. You built hundreds of thousands of subscribers,
No, it's
millions
amazing.
of views. So why is it over a year ago since the last time you uploaded?
It is basically complications. It's just we're just rejigging the team. And through that is just taken a lot longer than I've wanted to. And so, yeah, I want to do things in a different direction. And some of the people involved didn't want to. And it wasn't any bad or animosity. It was just kind of getting a little bit more control of it back. And, it's not easy to navigate YouTube. It's a very understanding, all the algos and this and that. And I want to go more to, abroad and go to the US and kind of doing all of these things. And you have different kind of paths that might not sit on the same as other people. And so I just kind of wanted to get the control back. And so, yeah, so it's kind of went on the back burner, but that's because a lot of other things have happened since then with me starting up other companies and things like that. So it's gone on the back burner, but it will come back.
You will upload again.
100%. I've even got a couple of films
What was
ready to go.
your favourite video that you did?
Oh, I think one of my favourites was Nigel Mansell, and just actually having a conversation like we're having. I think because I'm not a journalist and I'm not a know-it-all, and actually I'm just an enthusiast. I'm just someone that asks those silly questions that you might want to ask. and they're not too technical and they're not too testing, that I kind of, people really relax and open up, and I get a different kind of vibe and a different feel, and it just becomes very, very fluid. There's no real questions involved. It's just us chatting. And I went down with Nigel, and it was the most, obviously I did my, my DD, because he had such an incredible career. And, to get to poignant moments where, I'm talking to him and he, is welling up, and the stories and the history, and to have such a very raw, open-hearted conversation with such a legend was just the most amazing experience for me. And that, I think, was where I went, you know what, I really love interviewing people, and I really love kind of just talking and chatting and just loving what they've designed. Love it. Why have you collected these cars? It's the most eclectic collection. What made you do this? Getting inside the heads of people, I find really fascinating.
What I loved from your channel, my favourite video, was there is a very small, very short, very unassuming chap who has done wonderful things for the world of cars, who I've never mentioned before in this podcast, but his name's Peter Saywell.
Oh, Peter.
And his collection, if no one's ever seen the video before on Jodie's channel, his collection is so bang on what I would do.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. His taste, his specifications is second to none. And that video is actually my favourite video on your channel, because you're walking around with a bright green, say, Lamborghini Aventador. I can't remember what car was in what colour, but a bright green hypercar or supercar.
No, it wasn't. I can't remember.
Well, he had a Zonda, he had a 980, he had everything.
I know.
But then you'd imagine the person to own that collection would be fully outgoing and so loud and brash and labelled in gold and silver. No. And there's this little unassuming chap that wanders around so softly spoken with you. Has it always amazed you at who the drivers behind the cars are?
Yeah, that's what I mean, that's always, and often going to Peter, there isn't a lot of homework you can do before you go and interview him. And so that's what I just like to do, is let them talk and let them explain, how on earth did you get this collection of cars? I mean, it was, and then you would go down a little thing and you would go see this other barn, and you would open the barn doors and you would go, what the frick am I looking at? I mean, number one, how does he get enough time to drive all of those cars? But the knowledge of every single car, and there's another with Tony Robbins. I mean, I could list
Zach Brown.
Yeah, Zach. I mean, obviously he's a fountain of knowledge. But when you go to the more non-famous collectors and go through their history of why they've bought a car, and actually 100% of the time, the knowledge that they know that what they've designed, a lot of them that they've got made straight from the factory, the design process, the engine specifications, all of these things that they know and I mean, he's got how many cars? 70, 80 cars? I mean, I don't know. I was just bamboozled after the first 5. But the knowledge and the love and the passion and it's so amazing to actually for people to open their doors to show their collections. Because a lot of people are going, well, number one, it could be security issues. Number two, this is a really personal, private thing, and I don't want that be slapped all over YouTube. So that's something that I think that kids started to do, was to, people to have trust in me that, it was going to be just a really wonderful experience of me finding out why they've got to this point. How have they become such big petrol heads, and why did they choose that certain spec? And
with someone so passionate and can even barely control yourself talking about these cars, which is brilliant, because it shows that fuel runs through your veins. Yeah. What has ended up in your garage? Because one of the last videos on your channel was talking about you building a collection. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what makes up that collection?
No, I've made a very good career at driving everyone else's cars. I'm very lucky to have, to be tied with a brand for so many years. I was with Maserati, so I was very lucky to have beautiful Maseratis. I had my first Ferrari I bought was a Ferrari 550, which was one of the world speed record cars. And that was, so it had, a bigger fuel tank. It had racing clutch systems, bigger brakes. It had a big fuel tank. It had roll bars. Most amazing car ever. I'm very sad I got rid of that. And then I had Lamborghinis. I've gone through the whole thing.
With your height, have you ever struggled fitting in a Lamborghini? As your legs like both sides of the steering wheel, like up here with the nips?
No, definitely. No, but I had two Murcielagos, so they're pretty big. But it's amazing what I can squeeze into. I mean, I really can get into small cars when I really want to drive them.
What has been one of the favourites that you've owned that's made all of those fuel running through the veins absolutely explode with like, I should not have sold this?
Yeah, I mean, the 550 obviously was so beautiful, and it was, I think, one of 10 right-hand drive ones. I've just seen the prices go up and up and up, which is a bit of a annoyance. But I don't know, it's really difficult. I love my truck at the moment. I'm a truck girl.
What have you got?
I've got a Ford Ranger Raptor, and I love it.
I'm pretty sure Hammond drives one of those on a daily basis.
I don't know. He needs a stair lift to get up in that. He's too small.
Well, you are in the middle of the country at your pub. What on earth possessed you to buy a pub? Was it the pure fact that you could host car meets here, or what?
It's basically, I was brought up in this area, and I'd seen a lot of the little village pubs close their doors for good and be turned into houses. And I know how important it is for a rural community to have a pub. And I just did something called Celebrity MasterChef. And I got to the final of that, and it was a real eye-opener of food and how incredible food
Said very quickly and jumped over. That's amazing.
Oh, well, it just opened these doors, because food for me, as a model, you only ate a lettuce leaf. And then, when I was doing all my sports, I just ate food for fuel. And never really had enough time to go to Michelin star restaurants and things like that, even though people think that the modelling industry in my background probably would be very glamorous, but it wasn't actually. It was more like a McDonald's and a can of Coke. And so it really opened my eyes for food. And so I wanted to get into the hospitality industry, and it all coincided with the Half Moon, where we're at now, was closed. It was going to be another awful thing for a rural village to lose basically the heart of the community. And so I had this moment of madness, and I got some friends, and we said, let's save it. And we got it. And then we were like, holy shit, can we swear?
Yeah.
Holy shit balls. I mean, none of us knew where to buy a keg of beer. We had no idea what we were doing. And so it was a very steep learning curve, and it possibly is one of the best things I've ever done. And that's, I have to say, because I've got Gavin, the most amazing Gavin, who's, came on as a general manager, is now a business partner.
You and Jeremy Clarkson share so many similarities. It's unbelievable. But you did the pub first, right?
I did the pub first. Yeah, no. So I spoke to him a lot about, him opening his pub and what he's doing to highlight, the complexities and the hardships of being a farmer, and now of owning, a rural pub. And it's amazing. He's just put so many eyes on the industry, because the industry's in really dire need and needs a lot of help. And, we've got the highest beer taxes in Europe. In the UK, we've got, our business rate tax are through the roof. Everything is it's
food
tough.
You can barely claim VAT back on.
It's just horrendous. It's horrendous, and cost of living. And so, we're losing 3 pubs a day at the moment.
So has it been harder to run a pub than you expected?
Yes. Oh. And if it wasn't for Gavin or Dan, I don't think we would have survived. I know we wouldn't have survived. But
because the photos of this place that I've seen over the years, are that of a caffeine and machine
It really
without
is.
being named,
I
because
know.
I've seen pictures of the front sprawled with Paganis and hypercars and all sorts. So I think I know which one of the founding members may have had that influence on it.
Yeah, well, there's and Dan, both of them, Chris and Dan, both. Well, we all are massive car fanatics. So the one thing that we're very close to Goodwood here. So kind of running events around Goodwood was actually a very good idea, and making this a kind of really cool stop off, like a cafe in the machine. And so we were very lucky with one of the owners, Chris, owns a Pagani, a Zonda, and knows Horatio. So he spoke to him and said, why don't you use this as a base through the Festival of Speed? And so for a couple of years running, we had the Pagani Moon. So we had, I don't know, 15, 20 Paganis all out on the lawn where we're looking. And then we put on a special amazing Italian menus, and had big, ginormous kind of Parmesan wheels and things like that. So not the wheels of the car, obviously. So yes, and now I think, so we had Hyperluso that did an amazing event here a couple of weeks ago. They're coming back again. Got Conan Seg for this Festival of Speed coming. So it's great because we are close to Goodwood, and you can get, if you're a manufacturer, you can get, or a maker, you can get your all your owners to one place. We do a lovely lunch. I'm really plugging the pub now. And then you can go on to Goodwood and things like that. So it's working really well to do things like that.
Well, I'm thinking of having the van stopping over here myself to bring guests back
my
to
God.
during the Festival of
This
Speed.
spot is yours.
Do you think you've missed a Festival of Speed in the last few years, or is it something that absolutely sticks in your calendar?
It's amazing. And Charles March, or the Duke of Richmond, we've been like family friends for a very long time. So to see Goodwood to go from the very early Festival of Speeds, which I suppose would have been when I don't know how many years it's been going. No?
I have no idea.
I don't know, but I think I would have been there from very early days. But I used to go there a lot with the horses. So you've got the racetrack, you've got the horse racetrack, and then you've got the house, which is where they put the Festival of Speed on. So to see what Charles has done over the years, to see festival, I think the festival is now the biggest car kind of event in the world, almost, with the amount of people that come in and the amount of manufacturers that showcase new cars. And yeah, it's amazing, and it's just down there.
Do you ever tell yourself no, or do you always manage to squeeze something else in?
I've had to start doing that. And I think that I've always been a big pleaser, and I hate to let anyone down. But I think in the last 10 years, maybe 5 years, I've had to start being a little bit more kind of kinder to myself, of going, okay, you're tired, just chill, have a relaxed day, be a mum, cook a roast. You don't need to be spinning a billion plates.
What has been one of the biggest challenges to overcome in that period of that long story, all that context, the career to overcome?
I don't think there's anything that I never regret anything. And so, everything that I've done wrong, or I haven't done in the right way, it's happened for a reason, just to learn from it. And then you move on and try not to do it again. So I never regret. I wouldn't say that I've done some very stupid things in my life and made silly decisions, but that's all part of kind of making who you are, and it's all part of the story. But I don't ever look back at negativity upon those points. It's just a big pivotal learning point.
Well, Jodie, thank you for joining me in the back of the van. We've been here for an hour now, believe it or not.
We're
enjoying a wonderful pint that we might need to refill at your
go
gorgeous
to the bar.
pub. So thank you so much for joining me and telling me just a window of your entire story.
I've been dribbling
into your
on.
amazing life. It is extremely hot in the back of this van, so you definitely owe myself a subscribe and Kid in a Sweet Shop if you're not already too, because there'll be a video dropping in the not too distant future. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you
I
very
look
much
forward
for
to catching
coming.
you again in the future.
Yay! Let's go to the bar now. Ready?